Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. This is Joe with the LSA, and I'd like to welcome all of you to our webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Ad Testing, 1, 2, 3, Why and How to Test Your Ads, and will be brought to you by our guest presenter, Frank from Yahoo. So with that, let's get started. Over to you, Frank.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Frank Palmieri, and I manage a team of creative strategists here at Yahoo. And basically, I was a creative strategist myself for a long time. And before that, I worked as a copywriter in the New York publishing industry. So I've been doing ad writing for a long time, and I put together some, presentations on copywriting and ad testing to help advertisers keep up with the dynamics of the market. One of the things I'd like to say in the beginning is that we can never rest on our laurels. Ad testing isn't just to find a winner and find out what isn't working, although that's the primary thing. It's basically to keep fresh all the time, and it's kind of a virtuous cycle that we want to use. There we go. So I'm sorry about that, a little technical difficulty. So to get into the basics of the presentation here, we're going to talk about what ad testing is, because it's one of the topics that I think is sometimes overcomplicated. Statistical testing can be really complex and can involve a lot of components and a lot of science, and most advertisers don't have time for that. There are general industry organizations like eMarketer and everything that do big level tests with big data and a lot of multivariate stuff. But when we're testing our ads every day, we want to know what's the basic way for us to ad test and how it'll affect us. So, and we'll talk about a little about why we should test, besides what I mentioned about keeping fresh. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through a step-by-step method for testing. There are a lot of components that go into testing that are really simple and basic, but we lose sight of them, and therefore we dilute the test, and each step that goes along the test becomes more diluted. So I want to make sure that everyone stays on track as they're ad testing. And as I said, it's a very simple process, but it's easy to go astray. And then afterwards, we'll as Joe said, we'll take some time to answer some questions. So what is ad testing? Well, there's two kinds of testing, as I alluded to. There's A/B testing, which is very simply a way of comparing two versions of the same ad to gauge their performance. And then there's multivariate testing, which is a technique for testing a hypothesis in which multiple variables are modified. Now, multivariate testing, as I mentioned, can be good for big data, large amounts of information that's coming in, and you want to make some quick high-level decisions. But it's very, it's difficult. It takes time, and it's kind of indecisive. You can come to some general conclusions, but you can't really pinpoint specifically something that can help you. Therefore, when I speak of ad testing, I'm essentially speaking of A/B testing. So if and I mention this too because there are a lot of books out there in the market that can be helpful for setting up tests and getting into some of the more sophisticated statistics if you're interested. But I would stay away from the multivariate testing. It really there's too much involved, and I think that simple A/B tests are very, very effective. And I will also say we'll get into what A/B testing is, but specifically. But A/B testing can also be ABC testing or ABCD. It's basically a way of taking kind of a control ad and testing others against it. But a simple A/B is the best way to explain it. So we'll go with that, and we can take any questions on varying the number of ads if there are some toward the end. So before we get into the specifics and the logistical kind of 1, 2, 3 step stream of how we're moving, just to this should be obvious, but why should you test? And again, I'm very passionate about this. When I was a creative strategist and copywriter, and now as manager of a team, I'm always pushing this with my team because, as I said, the marketplace is very dynamic, and it gets more so as each year rolls on, and more sophisticated tools and techniques come out for measuring ad quality and performance. So we never want to rest on our laurels. So you want to test simply to get better ad placement. Now, we here at Yahoo with our Gemini search product, that's always been the case, right? Search, you want to, if you have a better ad coupled with your decent bid, you'll have a good placement. Well, now we also Gemini, the other half of that twin is native advertising. And for those of you who may not be as familiar with native, native is a kind of ad that fits the form and function in the area in which it's been placed. And by area, I mean like a stream of news, like on Yahoo's homepage, or sports, or finance, or you've probably seen your Facebook news feeds. And these are similar to search, a little higher up on the funnel, but very, very similar in that the ads should fit in with the news. So if you're reading a news story about you know, traveling to Hawaii or something, there may be an ad for Travelocity or something about a cheap flight or something like that. And basically, that is a similar deal. You want to get high placement in that as well. So basically, you want to test to get better placement, and better placement, of course, means more clicks for less money. If you're doing search, you can, you know, there's a big difference, as probably most of you know, in the top 3 ads or the right rail than farther down on the page. And you know, if you're on a budget and you have good quality ad, it's really going to make a difference, and that leads to more money for you because more people will see your ad and hopefully get more conversions. So ad testing is very important. Copywriting, of course, is extremely important, but we're assuming that you've written some decent ads, or you know the basics of copywriting, and now we want to see what's working and what's not working. And the last thing I'll say before I get into the step-by-step method is that we can learn just as much from bad ads as we can from good ads. So if you write an ad and you notice that it's really doing terribly, before you just toss it away, take some time to analyze it. And the way we're going to look at some ads now, and think why, and make a kind of hypothesis of why it's not working, and you might want to test that because you may learn something. So without further ado, we'll get into the very specifics here, how to test. So a lot of people think that ad testing is simply just looking at a couple of ads and seeing which performs better. Interestingly, that's a part of it. I call that the pre-test, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. I think of that as like formulating your hypothesis. You look at some ads and you see one works very well, or conversely, like I said, one is not working well at all, and you want to figure out why. That's part of it. But here's something that I think is really important. Keep in mind a step-by-step process before, during, and after your test, because if you don't, you're not really testing. You're just kind of going with the flow of a feeling or a gut instinct, and you can get easily distracted. So I put together what I feel is a step-by-step method that can make sure that you're testing as scientifically as possible within this simple structure. Like I said, we're not going to get into advanced statistics or anything here, and there are plenty of books that could get into that if you're a real stats head and you want to get into the math of it. But this is basically a good, I feel, a good method for simply testing on a very regular basis. So the first step, choose your objective. Now, that's easier said than done. You want to know your campaign goals, and you want to choose a metric you want to measure. For example, here are some. I mean, you can choose whatever metric you want, but you want to be consistent. So if you're, for example, if you're interested in customer acquisition, your metric might be the most conversions. If you're just kind of trying to get as much volume as possible, you want to make sure you're getting good volume. You know, sometimes broad match can be funky, and you want to make sure that you're putting your money in the best place. So you might want to look at the highest CTR out across that volume. You might want to look for the lowest cost per click if you're concerned with costs, and the same way you might want to look at the lowest cost per conversion if you're more concerned with those kinds of costs. A lot of people we have advertisers, brand advertisers that are interested in the clicks, and then we have some that don't really care about the clicks as long as they're getting the conversions. The point I'm making is that all of this stuff is fine and valid, and there may be other metrics that may be of interest to you. But the point is, make sure you stick to the campaign goal and metric that you pick in the beginning. Now, one other thing I should say here is that when you're first doing ad testing, if you haven't done it before, you might want to just jot down these points as you're doing them, like as a checklist. Choose your objective so you don't get sidetracked. But I don't want to make this seem like a laborious process. This will probably become as natural as writing ads is to copywriters. It'll become a natural flow. But for the time being, keep in mind step number one: choose your objective, and we'll talk about how you want to keep that consistent when we get to the end of the step-by-step method. So secondly, you want to define your target, and this is another thing that's easier said than done. Now, I listed some common targeting kind of options there. The two in the middle, demographics and geo, are probably familiar to a lot of you. I also put down there behavior. We here at Yahoo have a lot of behavioral information. If for those of you who have done the Gemini native route, we have some pretty sophisticated back-end behavioral targeting that's pretty cool. I would say any of those is fine, but you want to make sure that when you're testing with the same target across your tests. And again, that seems easier said than done, but you'd be surprised how many times advertisers had asked me why a certain ad wasn't working well and everything looked the same, and I go in and I see that they didn't realize they had set targeting a while ago for a certain campaign, and when they went into the ad group to test, they didn't realize that, oh, well, this one ad group had a different targeting, or the ad had a different targeting. The top one I want to spend a few moments talking about. I put general market. Here's something that most people don't think of, so I want to spend a few minutes. Let's say you don't have any specific targeting like demographics, geo, or sophisticated behavioral targeting, or things like day parting, or if you have it, but you want to think outside the box. There are a lot of tests have been done on the general market. By that I mean, take a look at the call to actions that are listed on the right. If you look at the top one, it says act now. It's basically appealing to anyone. The one on the bottom says act now for 50% off. But that's kind of and without talking about the rest of the ad, I'm just speaking to these calls to action right now. That would generally appeal to someone on a budget, right? 50% off is a pretty good deal. The one in the middle, 25% off, probably has the widest range. It'll probably reach the most amount of people. Now, I've done testing in the pre-digital age, and by the way, everything I'm mentioning here is good A/B advertising testing, whether it's digital or not. A lot of the fundamental processes, are the same as from the Mad Men era. It's basically appealing to your end user. So, if you think about it, at the top ad, Act Now, it seems like that would be that would reach the largest audience. But tests have been done where there is a segment of the audience that would see that and think, must be, I'm sorry, the Act Now 50% one, I'm sorry. If Act Now 50% you think would appeal to a lot of people because there's 50% off. But there are a lot of people would look at that and say, gee, that must be a cheap product. I don't know if I want to go for that. Believe it or not, we've done tests, and it's not a huge amount, but it's a significant amount. So what I'm getting at here is keep that in mind. I don't want to put too fine a point on this, but if you do want to, if you're trying to do a large test across a large group, you might want to keep in mind, like say that along the middle line where you're not really going for the low bargain budget type thing, but you're also not just saying act now in a very general way. Now you can do tests within all three of these areas, and that's the point. You just don't want to mix your metaphor when you're doing your test. So basically, step one, you want to pick a campaign goal and stick to it. Step two, you want to define a target and stick to it. Step 3, and these are all the preliminary steps, but they're all very important. Find your campaigns and ad groups to test. Now, again, this kind of goes along with the metrics that you want to pick, right? Like, you might, depending on which metric you're going for or what your goals are, there are a number of ad groups that you can look into. And I say campaigns or ad groups because within Native we do it by campaign right now. But basically, you might want to look at high volume ad groups and try to get, cut a wide swath, and that's a perfectly, in fact, a very common area in which to ad test. Another common one is low quality score. Sometimes when I was a creative strategist, I would be working with advertisers, and we'd find very heavily weighted ad groups that had a low quality score, and obviously it wasn't a good thing. And if these if there were keywords there that they, the advertiser felt strongly about, we wanted to look into why they were not performing well. So that would be a good area to test. Again, we talked about the people that were interested in cost rather than volume and click-through rate and all that. So you might want to look at your cost per acquisition ad groups. And then finally, probably the most common one is what I call specifically targeted. And this is probably what you think of when you first think of ad testing. You have a new product, you have a new line, you're not sure if it's going to appeal to the right demographic or whatever, and you want to test, the way you pitch the coffee pot versus the way you pitch it, the way you pitch a coffee pot to general users among a certain, let's say, a certain targeting group, and you can vary the copy a little bit and get an idea of what appeals to coffee pot users. So the point again here isn't that you should pick any of these. It's just whichever one you do pick, or if there's another type of campaign or ad group you want to test, make sure that you focus on that and you know that that's what you have in mind, and you don't mix your metaphors and have one high volume ad group and one that may have a low quality score but doesn't have high volume, because then it's not going to be an apples to apples test. Okay, now we're getting into the nitty gritty. This is kind of for copywriting nerds like myself. This is kind of the fun part. This is where the science meets the art of advertising. You want to notice, so you want to take a look at your ads. Well, first of all, let me back up a little bit. If it is a new product, as I mentioned before, you're going to have new ads, so you're going to be testing right out of the gate. But for purposes of a good example here, what I think works really well, let's say you put some ads up. You should go with your gut and try to put up some ads to the best of your ability that you think work, and then you let them run for a couple of weeks, and you see that one is doing really well or one is not doing well. So you want to notice patterns worth testing and draw a hypothesis. So here's a couple of ads that we actually tested here at Yahoo, and I want to go from here on in. We're going to go through a test like in kind of live. I mean, recreated live, so that I could show you exactly what the thought was and how we worked on our hypothesis and what we learned from it. So basically, you've done the first 3 steps. Now you've got these ads for this chicken wing recipe, and this was very interesting to me. If you look at these ads, the image is the same, and the description is a little bit different, although it has that same call to action, or pretty close same call to action. But as a copywriter, I was surprised by this. Wing it seems to me to be kind of a catchy, from a writing standpoint, it seems kind of catchy. You wing it, you're going with chicken wings. I would normally have expected that to work pretty well. Slow and Asian wings, to me, my gut instinct tells me, well, it's not bad, but it's basically just stating the product. And we usually, as a copywriter, I always push benefits over features. However, if you see the CTR here, there's no comparison. The second ad did 4 times better than the first ad when we ran it. Now, again, we didn't run a test. These ads were just placed up, And then after a couple of weeks, we noticed it. This was our pre-test stage. And I spoke with the creative strategist about it, and in fact, we discussed it in our team meeting that week. And what we thought, well, the hypothesis we came up with was, well, yes, we're also used to writing ads, and the client here was, was involved in the deal as well. They certainly know their product. That we all kind of, well, that I wasn't involved in that, but the creative strategist and the person on the other end, the advertiser end, thought, well, yeah, that winged is really cute. That would be good. But what they didn't realize, or the hypothesis was that, cleverness is good for writers, and maybe if you're very familiar with your product, you kind of get an inner chuckle out of it. But we're appealing to a mass audience, right? Our end user. And I should say, it's so important if you're doing copywriting, ad testing, always keep the end user in mind. And in this case, what our hypothesis was, because this was a native ad and it had a nice looking image there, that perhaps Slow and Asian Wings, the actual recipe itself, the title of the recipe, coupled with the picture, was much more enticing and reached the end user on an emotional level. One thing I'd like to say too is when I talk about copywriting, the three ingredients I say that are most important about copywriting are emotion, which is the first most important. We want to appeal to the emotional level. We want to speak the end user's language, so we don't want to get too technical or too inner joke, like I said before. And three, credibility and trust. Now, these ads didn't have any problems with credibility or trust, but I think that on an emotional level, I think Slow and Asian Wings with a nice picture is more conducive to wanting to click through and find out what this recipe is and where they can get the chicken wings, rather than just a clever little saying. Now, again, that's a hypothesis, right? This was not a test. It was a pretest. If you look at it, even though the image is the same, the first body copy says, "Make the most delicious wings tonight with our teriyaki marinade. Get the recipe." And the second one says, "Teriyaki marinade makes for the tastiest Asian-inspired chicken. Get the recipe now." Similar, but again, this is both an art and a science. Our art part says, here's a hypothesis, but the science part wants to run the test and make sure that our hypothesis is working. So let's move on to the next step. So we've noticed a pattern, and now we're going to choose a variable. So based on my hypothesis here, and you all may have other hypotheses, but and that's fine too. But continuing with this example, my hypothesis is that the title, what I like to call the igniter. Another thing that I preach is kind of 3 steps to actually writing an ad. An igniter, which ignites the end user's interest, usually the title. What I call an enlightener, which is what a lot of people call the competitive advantage. So in this case, delicious wings with teriyaki marinade. These are things that enlighten the end user to your particular product. And then what most people call to action, I call site sender, because we want action, but specifically on online advertising, we want to sense a site. And being a writer, I like the feel of ignite, enlighten, sense a site. But anyway, so the point I'm making here is that we could choose any of these variables and more, right? We could have switched out the image or display URL if we're in search, and there are other things too, right? You can even do targeting tests and site link tests, all kinds of things. You can also test. Talking about display URLs, you can test appended display URLs and things like that. But to continue forward with our example, we've chosen a variable, and it's the igniter or title. So we're going to keep, again, just to reinforce what I said at the beginning, we're going to keep all our targeting, whether it's demographics or if we have day parting or any geo-targeting, all that is going to be the same. We're going to run this in the same ad group, or if it's native, in which case it's a native in the same campaign. So yeah, let's try the title. And let's keep the igniter title the same, make everything equal except for the variable. So if we look at this test now that we're about to set up and run, we've got wing it is the igniter for the to add at the top. Slow in Asian wings is the title / igniter for the one on the bottom, which is what we discussed testing. We're keeping the image the same, the sponsor name of the company the same. I mean, obviously that probably would be the same anyway. But and then if you notice now, we've rewritten the body copy that contains the enlighteners to have the exact same enlighteners. Teriyaki marinade makes for the tastiest Asian-inspired chicken, and then our site sender, get the recipe now, is the same. We kept that word in now because we want to make sure that everything is the same except for the igniter. So when you're running the test, one thing at this point we want to just make sure that and this is why I said it might be good to when you're first doing ad testing to keep a kind of a checklist kind of thing going. I think this will become mental. Your muscle memory will be doing this for you after you do a lot of ad testing. But you want to check. In this case, we're checking the click-through rate is what we want to measure. We're choosing the same demographic. In this case, it was mothers age 35 to 44. We're keeping that the same. We're not putting it in another campaign or to see how it runs. The campaign ad group is the recipe campaign. Again, we're not mixing our metaphors here, even though sometimes it's tempting when you see certain things that are kind of similar across different campaigns. It's not going to be an apples-to-apples test. And then step 4, we drew a hypothesis, and our hypothesis was simply listing a recipe in the title accounted for the higher CTR. And again, I think this is a particularly good example because, as a writer, it's counterintuitive to me. So if the test results come through, I'll feel like I really learned something, which is what this is all about. And we'll talk about how to incorporate our learnings into the virtual cycle when we get to the post-test results. And then step 5, we chose the actual variable. So based on our hypothesis, we chose the variable, the title / igniter to test. And as I mentioned, we made sure everything was equal except the variable. And again, all these steps are fairly simple, but it's easy for stuff to slip through the cracks. So with this last step, please make sure when you're running your test, if you're probably doing a lot of cutting and pasting between Excel and the interfaces that you're using, make sure that if there's a slight difference in one ad, you catch it. You might want to run put it in the same column and do a dupes check on the data in Excel or something, because sometimes a word like now might escape you, which seems like a little thing, but it's really going to dilute your test results. Okay, so now we've checked off the first 6 steps, and now we're running the test. So want to make sure we're running the 2 ads simultaneously. And another part of the running the test, now that we've clicked live, set these things going, allow enough time to take into account differences in time of day, time of week, etc. It's pretty much what we call normalization. You want to make sure that if you run a test, for example, one of the areas that my creative strategists work in is the finance area, and if they were to run a test in finance during like March or early April, they're going to get a lot more clicks, regardless of how good the ad is, especially if it's on a tax product, than they would if they ran it in August or September. So that's got to be taken into consideration. But even more specifically and granularly, you want to make sure that you account for all the different buying times that could possibly be going on. Now, theoretically, of course, you could let the test run for days and days and weeks and gather more and more information. But then you reach the point where it's getting stale and you're not being dynamic. So what I like to do, or what I recommend, and it can vary a little bit based on the amount of volume you're getting for the keywords, but I would say 2 weeks is what I usually recommend to my my creative strategists, and that's what I used to do as a creative strategist and copywriter myself. And by doing that, you'll allow for weekly fluctuations or weekend fluctuations. You know, some buyers, as you know, buy late at night or on weekends or Monday, depending on the type of service that you have. And you know, if you see spikes, it'll be, you know, it'll be normalized out, as I mentioned. So keep that in mind. These are 2 points that you know, peripheral points to running the test that are really important. And then the final step is reviewing the results. And this is another way that people can go astray, and I'll explain in a second. But let's take the results of this. So magically now 2 weeks have passed, and we've let these ads run. Again, same image, same enlighteners, same site senders, but different igniter. Our hypothesis is that the slow and Asian wings is going to win. We might learn otherwise. Sure enough, our hypothesis worked out, and as a matter of fact, the test was even better than we thought, because when we ran it for 2 weeks, the CTR was 1.58, and I believe the pre-test it was 1.31 or something like that. But anyway, so this was a successful test. And by the way, I just want to point out so that no one's confused. If this was reversed, if the wing it had the 1.58 and it was reversed, it would still be a successful test. It would just be that our hypothesis was wrong, and that the you know, the clever title was better. But you know, usually your gut feeling can kind of steer you toward things. And as I said, you want to keep that in mind, not only for gut feelings about things that work, but gut feelings about things that might not work. And this was a good example about it. I didn't think Wing It was such a good. I thought Wing It was a pretty, not brilliant, but I thought it was a better title than just stating slow and Asian wings. And again, I don't want to confuse people. Normally, I always stress benefits over just stating a feature, which is, you could argue slow and Asian wings is the feature here. But I think with the native ads, coupled with the nice picture, it appeals more to our stomachs and therefore our emotions. So reviewing the results, here's where I mentioned, and here's why I mentioned this as an important part in the step-by-step process, and not, okay, I've run the test, I'm done. This is where I found, and I stress this too, because not only many people do this, I used to do this all the time as a copywriter. My gut feeling would lead me to almost make this mistake, and then I'd have to check myself. You'll find lots of times with tests, I mean, this test worked out for us, but you might have a test that you run those, and the CTR is maybe the same for each, or maybe it's a little bit higher for the other one, but you might notice, gee, well, the Wing It had about the same CTR, but the one with the recipe wow, it really killed it with the cost per click, or the CPA was really low. That's great. Or I got a lot of conversions. That is the winner. Great, I've got something here. Well, no, that's not the answer, because that's not what you were testing, right? You were testing this. In this case, we were testing the CTR. Now, what does that tell you, though? I don't mean to disregard that. What that tells you is set up another test. Start from the beginning. Look at what the CPA, if for example, you were looking at CPA, if you wanted to test the CPA based on the results, go back to the drawing board, look at what the CPA was on that initial pre-test observation, run the test the same way we discussed it, with all the targeting the same, the variables the same, except for that one variable. Let it run for another 2 weeks, and then if you see a variation in that metric, then then that's another test that's good. But this is an area that's, it's really easy to confuse. I know that we all are putting out ads all the time, and we're kind of pre-testing just by observing our ads, right? So our gut is always reacting more quickly than our tests, because we may not have time to do tests on everything. So I just want to make sure that we keep those, that you guys keep your results in line with your goals. Make sure that your goals are the same from step 1 through step 7, and you'll be in good good hands. And in this case, CTR was what we were testing, and so basically we can check off the final part of our checklist. So now we've done our tests, and this is great, and we've learned from it, and how does this fit into the overall picture? And this kind of gets into what I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. This is a dynamic world. I mean, it's so fast, it's crazy. Things are coming up, like I said, new tools are coming up to develop things, and people are aping things. So what you want to do is you want to optimize, as we did. We look at what we do, our pre-test, we'll notice patterns, see what looks good. We want to run the test and take the measure, and like I said, see, okay, this recipes work better in this campaign. So that's what we've learned from it. Now we want to adapt that to similar campaigns going forward, right? We want to implement what we learned. And here's the crux of it. Here's where it's really important. We don't want to just stick those newfound learnings in, set and forget. We want to continually optimize. To give you a quick example of how important that is, when there was a period when I was a creative strategist, I worked with ticketing companies on the entertainment vertical. We were getting, clients were not getting great click-through rates with just having the display URL, say ticket.com. So my recommendation was to use what I think I alluded to earlier as appended display URLs, ticket.com/Lady Gaga, ticket.com/Radiohead, or whatever. And this was immensely successful because it was more relevant. Assuming the landing page was aligned with the ad, people were getting, end users, again, the people we want to speak to, were getting right in line with what they wanted, instead of having to go to like a general landing page or not seeing what they wanted. When they would see the artist right there, it was great. So those ads were going to the top, like we spoke before about being rated high and having lower CPCs as a result. However, after a while, I've been recommending this to my clients, and other astute advertisers will go into the landing pages and seeing what was working. And by the way, you all should be doing that too, just when you're writing your ads, seeing what's working with not only your own ads but everyone else, so you can put in the right enlighteners and site senders and igniters that are getting the ads to the top. But people started aping that, and pretty soon the search engine was filled with that, and it wasn't unique anymore. At that point, we started recommending putting the artist in the beginning, so ladygaga.ticket.com. But you get and that was working for a while until people started aping that. But I think you get the idea. You've got to add this kind of is a nice little bookend on why ad testing is important, because you want to go from that last step of adapt to optimize and keep that virtuous cycle going. So just some quick takeaways other than the 7-point checklist. Choose one campaign goal and stick to it from beginning to end, and don't lose sight of it when you're measuring results, no matter how good the results may seem in another metric. Then test the one variable, as we mentioned, one variable only. Be patient, let your test run for at least 2 weeks, and that really is important, because the normalization part can really mess things up and skew things if you, and believe me, it is tempting after a couple of days if you see one ad run away, and that is a good indicator. It's like another little pretest, because if it is running away with getting many more clicks, probably is the winner, but you won't know for sure until you let it run through that normalization period. And then, as I said, continue to test regularly. Consider your successful test a victory, but not the victory. You should just continue to test.
Thanks, Frank, for conducting today's webinar, and thanks to everyone for attending. If you have any questions or would like to be connected with today's speaker, simply email us at webinars@thelsa.org. Also, for a look at what's coming and to access all of our past webinars, visit www.thelsa.org/webinars. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.